What's up, guys? Welcome back. The time has officially come to fire up the grills and smokers, but don't worry, for my folks that don't have a grill, I've got you covered too. Today we'll be making ribs in the oven and the smoker, but before we do that, please take a quick second to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that bell to enable notifications as well. All right, guys, meet me in the kitchen. Let's make it happen. First things first, we're getting the party started with 2 racks of baby back ribs. I made sure to get ribs that are equal in size and weight. That way this experiment can be accurate. Throughout this video, I'm going to treat these ribs as similar to one another as possible. And most importantly, this is all about making sure you guys know how to make these ribs in the oven and on the smoker or grill. So the first thing we're going to do is break out some sharp kitchen scissors and trim these ribs up. Anything that's hanging off that might burn during the cooking process, we're going to go ahead and remove. We're also going to remove the membrane on the back side of each of these racks of ribs. This is optional, but it's something that I've always done. There's some folks that would argue against this, but I think removing the membrane helps the seasoning penetrate a little bit better and helps the ribs get nice and tender. These are the seasonings I'm going to use on each of these racks of ribs today. My AP, my hot AP, and this barbecue rub from Killer Hogs, which is one of my favorite products. I'm also going to hit the oven ribs with a little bit of liquid smoke just to help them cheat a little bit. Otherwise, the recipe is exactly the same for each. We're going down with a little yellow mustard to act as a binder. That way the seasoning really sticks to the meat. You could also use olive oil or hot sauce or whatever else you want to use here, but I like to use yellow mustard because that's what I've always used. Rub a nice light application on there. It's not there for flavor at all. You won't taste the mustard. It's just there for the rub to stick to the meat. Personally, I like to season the presentation side of the ribs last, so we're gonna go ahead and start with the back side of the ribs. The first coat is gonna be my hot AP seasoning. That way there's a little bit of spice there. We're gonna layer flavors, so the hot goes down first, the original AP next, and then finally we're gonna coat it with that barbecue rub to add some beautiful color and tons of flavor. If you have your own favorite seasonings, by all means go ahead and use those. Whatever you got in the pantry or whatever you like on your barbecue will work just fine for this recipe. If you do want to try my AP seasoning, I have a code for you down in the description box below, so make sure you check that out. We're gonna do the other side the same way. Gotta show both sides the same love and attention. I do like to season the presentation side last, that way the color is nice and even. And I also like to press the seasoning into the meat rather than rubbing it, as the name would imply, because sometimes when you rub it, the seasoning will clump together and you have some bald spots. I'm gonna put the oven ribs on a wire rack like you see right here and place those into the oven. And then the other ones are going straight onto the Traeger. Both ribs are being cooked at 275 degrees. Quick reminder, guys, that all the specific measurements and ingredients for this recipe can be found in the description box below, so make sure you check that out. Quick little check-in with our oven ribs after about 90 minutes. This is how we're looking. Not quite ready to get wrapped in foil just yet. And this is how our ribs on the smoker are looking. After about 2.5 hours, they ended up being ready to get wrapped in aluminum foil. There's a couple tricks that I use to know when the ribs are ready to get wrapped in foil. First and foremost, I use my finger to wipe across the top of the rib to see if the seasoning is sticking to the meat. If it is sticking and forming a bark, we know that we're good to go there. And secondly, I use the tongs test or the bend test, where you pick the ribs up with some tongs and see if they start to have some bend to them. As you can see here, both racks of ribs passed both tests right at the 2.5 hour mark, so it's time to wrap these in some foil. Now, this is when the recipe gets super healthy, guys. So if you're part of the health patrol, go ahead and cover your eyes. We're gonna roll out some heavy duty aluminum foil, go down with a few pats of butter. I like to use Kerrygold grass-fed butter, or you can use the blue stuff like they use at barbecue competitions, the parquet butter. Not the healthiest stuff in the world, but it's delicious. Now we're going down with some brown sugar and some honey. This is going to sweeten things up quite a bit. As you can see from the seasoning blends that I chose, there is a little spice in the seasonings. So this sweeter wrap kind of blends nicely with the flavor profile. On the bottom side, we're going down with more butter, more brown sugar, and more honey. We're going to use a little liquid to help these steam and kind of tenderize in the foil. The liquid we're going to use today is pineapple juice, but you can use apple juice, chicken broth, or beer. I'm gonna wrap these nice and tight like a little pork present. And these are going back on the smoker and back into the oven for about 60 to 90 minutes. We wanna check for tenderness before we unwrap them. There goes that pineapple juice. Save a little bit for your tequila later. Remember, guys, we're here for a good time, not a long time. Make sure you wrap these up nice and tight. We don't want anything to escape out of there. We want all that steam to remain in the aluminum foil, helping these ribs get nice and tender. There we go. Now these bad boys are going back into the oven and back into the smoker. You really want to give your ribs enough time in the foil to get nice and tender, so don't rush this process. You can check them every once in a while. Usually it takes about 60 to 90 minutes at least at 275. If you have a larger rack of ribs, the bigger the ribs are, the longer it's gonna take to get tender, so just keep that in mind as well. The way that I like to check for tenderness is with a food thermometer or a toothpick. You wanna insert that into the ribs and you wanna feel very little resistance. They should be nice and soft and tender. You're not really checking for a temperature here with the thermometer, but if you were to check for a temperature, it would probably be somewhere between 203 and 210 degrees when they get nice and tender like so. Once you have them right where you want them, we're gonna go ahead and coat these in our favorite barbecue sauce. My favorite is Blues Hog, but use whatever your favorite barbecue sauce is. You wanna warm the sauce a little bit before you brush it onto the ribs. Never put cold sauce on hot food. We're gonna brush that on nice and even. I don't like my ribs too saucy, so personally, I only sauce the top side. Then we're gonna pop them back into the oven or the smoker and allow that sauce to get nice and tacky and glaze up on those ribs. It starts to caramelize a little bit the sugars that are in the barbecue sauce. Can't wait for you guys to try this recipe. Now that cookout season is finally upon us, please let me know in the comments what other recipes you want to see. Oh man, these ribs are gonna be good. So to recap, guys, we had these in the oven and the smoker at 275 for about 2 to 2.5 hours. We removed them and then we wrapped them in foil for another 90 minutes. Unwrap them, glaze them in the sauce, pop them back in the oven and smoker for another 30 minutes to allow that sauce to caramelize. And now, my friends, feast your eyes on these beautiful baby back ribs. We're gonna go ahead and carve these up and get ourselves a taste test. Oh man, look at that, nice and tender, perfectly cooked. We're gonna slice these up and I am gonna dig in. Ribs are one of my favorite things. I can't have a cookout without making a few racks of ribs. My guests always ask for these. It's not a super fair comparison just because the smoker is a much better vessel to cook these in, but the oven gets the job done just as good for the most part. I will say that the ribs on the smoker were a little bit more tender and obviously had a little bit of smoke flavor. The Traeger doesn't really give you too much of a smoke ring, so you're not gonna see a huge smoke ring here, but they are delicious. The Traeger does a good job with these. They're fully plated up now. Brace yourself for a trademark money shot. Say it with me, guys, looking good. As you can see, there's a little baby smoke ring here. It's about time to get in there for the taste test. I'm gonna taste the oven ribs first. These bad boys were perfectly cooked. This is exactly how I like my ribs. The ones on the smoker might have been slightly overcooked, but people like theirs falling off the bone. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you give your boy a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button and the bell to enable notifications. And as always, thank you for your support.